Hey there, folks. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we've got something incredibly intriguing for you. A story about Rayon and his unexpected journey of reincarnation for revenge in a mystical world. Now, let's get started. In the cover of a moonless night, a chilling breeze swept through the shadows, the moonlight playing a coy game of hide-and-seek with the world. Rayon, the master of stealth, knelt gracefully, his sharp eyes seeking the source of the voice that complemented his work. With the utmost humility, he replied, "Thank you, respected Sir Darius Robert Theoreth." Sir Darius's gaze, a chilling mix of admiration and menace, locked onto Rayon. He ominously spoke of a prophecy, one that foretold Rayon's death at his hands on this very night. Despite the gravitas of the moment, he acknowledged Rayon's performance as the Shadow Chief, acknowledging that their family's power had grown thanks to Rayon's dedication and ruthless efficiency. Rayon, ever the modest servant, merely replied that he had executed his duties as expected. However, the atmosphere tensed as Darius inquired, "Do you think the shadows need freedom?" The unspoken rule was that shadows obeyed commands without questioning, but Rayon's loyalty was unwavering. Suddenly, Darius accused Rayon of deviating from the rule and acting independently. Rayon was taken aback, struggling to understand how his secret disobedience had been exposed. The room seemed to close in on him as he frantically tried to justify his actions. It was then that Darius revealed the dark and twisted secret that had kept their family's reign of terror intact for generations: brainwashing. The Robert family's malevolence extended to purchasing or kidnapping children, raising them to become lifelong assassins, devoid of personal desires or morals. These children were nothing more than loyal hounds, following the family's every command. Yet, Rayon had somehow managed to break free from these insidious chains, and he couldn't comprehend how Darius had unearthed this closely guarded secret. In response, Rayon mustered the courage to ask Darius how he had discovered his disobedience, and the truth was unveiled. The assassins wore two collars, one for brainwashing and the other for a far more sinister purpose. Darius nonchalantly snapped his fingers, revealing the existence of the second collar. Rayon's world spiraled into chaos as an intense, excruciating pain radiated from his chest. Blood gushed from his mouth, and he writhed on the floor, clutching his chest as if his heart were being ripped apart. A dark, crimson aura enveloped him, a manifestation of his agony. Darius, with a sickening satisfaction, explained the source of Rayon's torment: the rage worm. It was a sinister enchantment that allowed the family to control and observe the emotions of the enslaved assassins, a cruel means of ensuring loyalty. Rayon's shock and anguish were palpable as he realized the depth of the family's depravity. Dazed, angry, and suffering, Rayon finally cried out in despair, demanding to know why they had subjected their victims to such torment. The room echoed with his cries, shrouded in darkness, treachery, and the horrifying truth of the Robert family's malevolence. As Darius stood there, his demeanor seemed to contradict the earlier facade of fairness and righteousness. He mused to himself about the concept that every person wore a mask, but his own mask happened to be thicker than most. It was at this point that Rayon decided to share his own backstory, revealing the tragic history that had led him to this point. Rayon explained that he had been kidnapped at an age he couldn't even recall, raised as a hunting dog for the Robert family. He spoke solemnly of his life, devoid of emotions or a mind of his own, forced to serve as the head of the Shadow. Yet, fate had intervened when he coincidentally learned a breathing technique known as the Fire's Ring. This technique, he claimed, was the divine skill of the finest swordsman, and it had allowed him to break free from the brainwashing that had kept him in chains for so long. Despite his newfound freedom, Rayon found himself facing a cruel twist of destiny. He questioned why, instead of the freedom he had yearned for, he had been met with the prospect of death. Despair washed over him as he pondered the sins he might have committed to deserve such a meaningless end. Suddenly, a spark ignited within Rayon's spirit, and he resolved that his life could not end like this. He rose to his feet, determination etched across his face. His sudden resurgence startled and surprised Darius, who couldn't fathom how Rayon could even stand in his grievous condition. With a fiery determination, Rayon glared at his opponent, preparing to attack. He was determined to at least injure Darius or take his arm before succumbing to his wounds. With a battle cry, he bravely lunged forward, his spirit and fury on full display. He declared that he wouldn't die so pathetically. Darius saw the wrath of the enslaved assassin approaching, and he swiftly raised his arm to counter. In a split second, Rayon's body was slashed through by Darius's sharp blade. blood spraying from the wound. His head rolled off his shoulders and onto the ground, his eyes filled with emptiness. Darius stood before the lifeless body of the once enslaved assassin, contemplating the turn of events. He had believed he had prevented any escape or rebellion, but he was taken aback by Rayon's ability to break free from the brainwashing and even attack him despite the excruciating pain inflicted by the rage worm. With an air of annoyance and a small cut on his hand, Darius pondered when was the last time he had been injured. He was vexed by the fact that he had been bitten by his own disposable hunting dog. As other assassins and caretakers hurried to the scene at Darius's command, Rayon's eyes, though lifeless, still glared at the torture he had faced, a testament to his enduring spirit and refusal to surrender even in the face of death. As Rayon lay there, contemplating his despair and hopelessness, he realized that there was no way he could have won against the formidable Darius, the strongest of them all. He began to let go, thinking that there was nothing he could have done differently. Regret washed over him as he pondered the humiliation and manipulation that had characterized his entire life. He lamented the fact that he couldn't complete the fire's ring, the skill he had learned before his untimely demise. In a desperate cry, he exclaimed that he didn't care if he fought a devil or a god. All he wanted was revenge. It was at this moment of desperation that a charm beside him started to glow, and a system window opened. The window displayed that he had been chosen by rage, and his body would now be possessed. But the window quickly turned red, signaling that the vessel's body had died, and it displayed an error message, creating a sense of chaos and uncertainty. In a sudden shift of setting, we were transported to a sunny and bright field where birds chirped, and the sun radiated warmth. A woman's voice called for someone named Sunny to look at her, and a baby's voice responded, reaching out his tiny hands, calling her mama. The woman held a toy in her hand and playfully interacted with the baby. Rayon's voice narrated, revealing that the woman cuddling the baby was Sylvia. He expressed that it was hard to believe that he had been reincarnated as a child with all the memories of his past life as an assassin. Initially, he thought it was a dream, but no matter how much he slept, he couldn't wake up from it. Sylvia held the baby, whom Rayon now inhabited, in her arms, commenting on the beautiful weather and expressing her wishes for the patriarch to return home soon. She playfully asked the baby, referred to as Shiny, to try and say Mom. Rayon's gaze fell upon Sylvia as he pointed out that she couldn't keep calling him Shiny forever. He also expressed his suspicion that the patriarch must be very busy since he hadn't shown his face in the past 100 days. He admitted that he couldn't figure out much after his reincarnation, but he was aware that he had been born into a wealthy and renowned family. He reasoned that being born into a powerful family was better than a normal one and reiterated his determination for revenge, driven by the persistent rage and desire for retribution that still consumed his thoughts. Despite his thirst for revenge, Rayon acknowledged the need for patience. He was unsure of the family's position, the current situation, or the extent of his new family's influence. The abrupt transition from a life of darkness and despair as an assassin to the warm embrace of a new life as an infant left him bewildered but resolute in his quest for revenge. Deep in contemplation, he reflected on his past life, burdened by the knowledge that he had been unable to complete the enigmatic fire's ring. As he pondered his unfinished task, he knew that he needed to be patient, for time had an uncanny way of weaving its own tales. Rayon, by blood, was a part of the illustrious Robert family, known throughout history for producing the most exceptional assassins. But revenge, like a bitter pill, had left a taste of unfinished business. To achieve his vendetta, he knew he had to suppress his emotions, waiting patiently for the right moment. Amidst these thoughts, Rayon couldn't help but be captivated by the opulent mansion that stood before him. It was a mansion that bore the weight of countless secrets, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the family within was more than just renowned. Suddenly, the tranquility of the scene shattered as a voice rang out in panic, calling to Sylvia. The urgency in the voice was palpable, and it was clear that something significant was afoot. The voice proclaimed the arrival of the patriarch, and Sylvia's reaction was nothing short of bewildered. As Sylvia stood there, dazed by the shocking revelation, Rayon couldn't help but speculate. Could this patriarch be his own grandfather? It was a notion that sent shivers down his spine. Sylvia, shaken by the news, expressed her need to prepare for her father's arrival. But the maid's response was stark and unsettling. It was too late. He was already here. In the blink of an eye, the atmosphere in the room changed dramatically. Sylvia and the maid were frozen in a state of bewilderment, their faces etched with an eerie tension. A voice announced the patriarch's entrance, and a gate swung open. In walked a man of undeniable presence, flanked by 2 imposing guards. The very existence of this man overwhelmed Rayon, who watched in awe as he entered. The royal gown that clung to his form fluttered in the air, adding to the sense of regality that accompanied him. In the midst of all this, Rayon, just a baby, let out an involuntary squeak, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. The man who had arrived was no ordinary figure. He was Glenn Zygarde, the zenith of the continent and the northern king of annihilation. The very air seemed to tremble in his presence. As Glenn's piercing gaze landed on the baby in Sylvia's arms, Rayon couldn't help but feel a deep sense of concern. How had he, a mere baby hero, found himself reincarnated into the most powerful family on the entire continent? The weight of this revelation bore down on his young shoulders. Sylvia, ever respectful, approached her father with trepidation. She asked if he wanted to hold his grandchild. Glenn, the esteemed patriarch of the house, responded with a suggestion. The baby, he said, would be named Rayon, and the name carried a profound meaning. To live like a shadow, as if the warrior was present, and yet not there. It was a name that would define the path of the newest member of this enigmatic family, and Rayon couldn't help but wonder at the destiny that lay ahead. As Rayon lay there, his baby eyes widening at the revelation of being named Rayon once again, he struggled to process how his past and present lives seemed to intertwine. Night eventually fell upon the land, and the soft, silvery glow of the moonlight bathed the room. It was then that Rayon decided to feign slumber in his crib. While he pretended to sleep, his mind was alert, contemplating his next steps. He wondered if everyone else in the household had gone to sleep as well. Sitting up, he considered that after 100 days, he finally had the chance he had been waiting for. Rayon recalled that, ever since he had been reborn, Sylvia would always be by his side, ready to cuddle him, preventing him from using his mana. But now, with the opportunity to sleep in a separate crib, he sighed in satisfaction, knowing that the time had come for him to make progress. Rayon knew that this was his moment. He sat upright and crossed his legs to adopt a certain stance, calling upon his innate fire ability. He explained that the continent's normal training methods used various breathing styles to absorb nature's energy and gather aura in the energy core. However, the fire rings he had obtained offered a different path. Elaborating on how the rings worked, Rayon explained that when a mage used their energy, it shaped the heart's ring, enhancing their physical abilities and energy manipulation techniques. This unique breathing technique was the key to becoming a perfect martial artist, and it had the advantage of transcending others who didn't fully comprehend its capabilities, like Darius. Rayon believed that by mastering this technique and making Zygarde's swordsmanship his own, he could achieve his goal of defeating and enacting revenge upon Darius, making it more than just a dream. Analyzing himself, Rayon acknowledged his skepticism, primarily due to his premature body, filled with freezing energy that kept him feeling cold even after sleeping for more than 20 hours. Closing his eyes to assess the blockages within him, he realized that there were 9 places obstructed. Fearing that his circuits would be blocked by the cold, he knew that he had to break through these blockages using the power of the fire's ring. However, he hesitated to simply discard the highly pure cold energy. He contemplated whether he could somehow merge it with the fire's flow and circulate it throughout his body. Time passed, and Rayon concluded his training, despite considering it slow. He was making significant progress. Just before he decided to move on to the next stage, a sense of agitation washed over him. He was tired, and he questioned the stamina of his premature body, feeling fatigued after such minimal training. But as exhaustion overcame him, Rayon couldn't fight it any longer. The weight of his eyes became unbearable, and he slowly drifted into a deep slumber, dreams and possibilities swirling in his young mind, a baby hero in the making. As Rayon soundly slept in his crib, little did he know that Glenn, the enigmatic patriarch of the family, had emerged from the shadows to observe his grandchild. Glenn raised his hand above Rayon's head, and small sparkles of energy twirled around him. Night transformed into day, and the golden rays of the sun illuminated the vast and luxurious mansion. The cutest protagonist, young Rayon, woke up and began to crawl on the floor, muttering incoherent babble. Sylvia followed him with an infectious enthusiasm, encouraging him to crawl further, her joy apparent as she playfully squealed in delight. However, Rayon, with the mind of an adult trapped in a baby's body, was increasingly distressed and annoyed. He couldn't help but express his irritation, deeming playing with Sylvia a tiresome endeavor. Pretending to be a baby was not his idea of fun, and he even contemplated the alternative of enduring the cold energy from his training. Their playful interaction continued, but then Sylvia was called away by a strange voice, diverting her attention. Her face immediately lit up as she turned to face the source of the voice, addressing the man as the saint. The saint, taking a slight bow to pay his respects, requested Sylvia to address him as Sir. Rayon's baby eyes widened as he observed the man before him. He wondered if the person he was looking at was indeed the renowned Saint of the Rags. Providing more background on the characters, our hero narrated that the saint possessed divine healing and medical techniques known throughout the world. Despite being the most famous physician, he was rarely seen due to his wanderlust. Approaching closer, the saint gazed upon the baby, expressing that he had come to see Sylvia after hearing about Rayon's birth. He gently picked up Rayon to examine him closely, complimenting the baby's red eyes and blonde hair, features inherited from his beautiful mother. With genuine curiosity, he asked for the child's name. At first, Sylvia hesitated to respond, but she eventually admitted that the child's name was Rayon. This revelation took the saint aback, and he questioned the choice, fully aware of its meaning as shadow. Sylvia hesitantly agreed with the name's interpretation. The saint, with an air of disappointment, expressed his confusion about what Glenn, the patriarch, was thinking when he named the child. Rayon observed their interactions, realizing that they were surprisingly casual with each other. In his past life, he had heard rumors about the Northern King of Annihilation being friends with the Saint of the Rags, and now, witnessing their connection firsthand, it became clear that those rumors held some truth. Nonetheless, the saint held young Rayon firmly in his arms, his face lit up with joy as he sought a closer look. He gently placed his hand over the baby's body, and an unusual energy flowed and shimmered over the tiny hero. The saint's facial expression shifted, indicating that something was amiss. Sylvia also noticed this and inquired about it. The man then delivered the unsettling news to her. The baby had been afflicted by the bitter cold curse, and his energy circuit had been blocked by ice energy. He explained that with concurrent treatment and future checkups, the baby could be saved from an untimely death, but the sorrowful fate hung over him if left untreated. Sylvia's eyes widened in shock, her voice trembling as she rejected the truth, refusing to accept that her child was dying. Just as the saint was about to discuss treatment, a voice interrupted the conversation. It was a maid, rushing forward to inform the saint that the patriarch was urgently looking for him. The saint reluctantly agreed to leave, remarking on the patriarch's unfortunate timing. Observing the situation, Rayon realized that knowing about the disease did not change anything for him. As long as he could complete the fire ring in time, he believed that such a curse wouldn't be an issue. However, a single teardrop fell onto his face, halting his thoughts. He gazed upon the crying face of Sylvia, who was still in denial and believed the saint's words to be a lie. Sylvia's tears turned into sobs and agonizing screams of pain as she fell to the floor, clutching her baby tightly. She made a desperate promise to make it better at any cost, unwilling to accept that her child was suffering from a deadly disease. Rayon's eyes widened, and his heart seemed to skip a beat. He struggled to understand the powerful emotion welling up within him, and he felt a deep ache in his chest. He watched himself observing the anguish of the distraught woman and realized he did not want to witness such pain. Suddenly, Sylvia ceased her crying when her baby's tiny hand reached out to touch her face, wiping away the tears. She looked at her child in shock, her eyes filled with astonishment. Rayon, in a heartfelt attempt to reach out to her, managed to mutter the word, "Mommy." It was a moment of profound connection, a small voice breaking through the turmoil, and a glimmer of hope in the face of despair. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, Glenn was deeply engaged in a conversation with the saint when a sudden commotion erupted from another room. The voices of the maid urgently called for Lady Sylvia to stop, and Glenn couldn't help but wonder what all the ruckus was about. The maid hurriedly followed Sylvia, who was at the center of the commotion, and warned her about the patriarch's presence. The door to the room finally gave way, and despite the maid's best efforts, Sylvia burst into the room. She glared at her father, gasping for breath after her frantic entrance. Glenn's cold, red eyes fixed upon his daughter as he confronted her about the reason for this sudden chaos. He spoke of her rude and unsightly behavior, demanding an explanation. Sylvia, her eyes filled with tears, knelt before her father on the floor, and through sobs, she begged him to save her child. She was persistent, repeating her pleas, reminding her father how much the child meant to her. However, Glenn did not appear to be moved by his daughter's desperation. He continued sipping on his tea, seemingly unfazed. He coldly questioned why he should save someone who could not contribute to the family. In his eyes, the child was a stark example of the harsh realities of a martial artist's life. Sylvia continued to plead with her father, even going so far as to reveal that the child was his grandson. Still, Glenn remained unyielding. The most he would offer was to give the child the Zygarde name, and he advised his daughter to be thankful for such a generous gesture. Sylvia's tears showed no sign of stopping as she wailed and screamed for her father. The cruel patriarch then ordered his guards to remove her, and the brutish men forcefully dragged her out of the room. Sylvia's cries echoed through the mansion as she desperately implored her father to save her child, her anguished pleas reverberating throughout the grand estate. Amid this distressing scene, the saint observed the commotion with disappointment, sighing and labeling the patriarch as stubborn. In an unexpected twist of events, the saint questioned Glenn about his plans now that he had summoned him to assess his grandson's condition. The room seemed to hang in heavy tension as the patriarch considered this new development. The patriarch, seemingly unfazed by the confrontation between Sylvia and the saint, calmly sipped on his tea and requested the details of the child's condition. He explained that as Rayon grew, the condition worsened, but thanks to the patriarch's aura pushing out some of the cold air, the child would be fine for a little while. However, the revelation that his grandson would never be able to become a martial artist due to his condition dawned upon the patriarch. Intrigued by the child's name Shadow, the saint questioned why it had been chosen when there were so many other names to consider. The patriarch offered an interesting perspective, revealing that the name Rayon did not just mean shadow. He explained that 1,000 years ago, it had held another meaning as well. As the story progressed, the setting shifted to a moment when Sylvia held a spoon with some medicine, encouraging Rayon to take it. This medicine was provided by the saint, and they anticipated a speedy recovery for the child. Both the maid, Helen, and Sylvia closed their eyes, hoping for the baby's healing. When they heard the baby squeal and reach out for his mother, there was a celebration of joy, as they believed that the child was on the path to recovery. Helen agreed with Lady Sylvia, holding her son firmly in her arms. Rayon, now feeling better, noticed that the medicine had the fire attribute, which created warm air to push out the cold air from his mana circuits. Satisfied with the results, Sylvia encouraged her son and playfully asked if he understood her intentions. Rayon, feeling nervous and hesitant, accepted and took in more medicine. Fast-forwarding a couple of years, we find a grown-up Rayon, no longer the baby he once was. He narrates his daily routine, explaining that after playing with Sylvia and Helen, during nap time and at midnight, he would dedicate himself to training. 2 more years passed, and our hero is now 5 years old. We see Rayon, now a child with a sense of satisfaction, sitting upright on his bed, smiling as he observes a system window displaying his achievements at such a young age. The window highlights that he has achieved the 2nd ring of fire. Rayon gazes upon the message window, contemplating the factors of the 2-star ring of fire. He explains that at this stage, the flames revolve in a cross formation, and his energy observation has become more sensitive. Deep in contemplation, he celebrates his achievements, aware that his path to becoming a powerful martial artist has just begun. The morning sun's gentle rays streamed through the curtains, illuminating Rayon's bedroom. He was quietly engrossed in his computer, engrossed in a digital world of adventure, as the soft hum of his game filled the room. However, his virtual quest was abruptly interrupted by a familiar voice. Helen, Rayon's mother called out, her voice reflecting the early hour. She inquired if she could take his laundry. Rayon, barely lifting his eyes from the screen, gave her an absent nod of approval. Helen, a diligent figure in his life, began sorting through his laundry. Rayon watched her go about her task, realizing that she couldn't see what had suddenly appeared before him, a mysterious message window. It was a comfortable status window, offering access to all his stats, and it had become an integral part of his life. Rayon reflected on when he first obtained this unique window. It had been when he received the 1-star fire ring, a powerful artifact with untapped potential. At first, he hadn't understood its significance, but soon he realized that this window was his gateway to a new world of abilities. He recalled Helen's strange reaction when he first started interacting with the window. It was clear that the message was meant for him alone, and its existence puzzled him deeply. As Rayon delved into contemplation, he acknowledged his progress. He now possessed the 2-star fire ring. However, challenges remained. His stamina was still disappointingly low, and a bitter cold curse clung to him. He stroked his chin, pondering that this transformation wouldn't have been possible without the fire attribute medicine. He gave credit to Helen and Sylvia, along with everyone at the annex, who had cared for him like a prince for the past 5 years. Yet, the realization struck him that he was only 5 years old, with plenty of time ahead. The curse and low stamina were still significant obstacles. In his past life, he had been renowned as the continent's best assassin and had mastered the art of the Ring of Fire. He summoned a ball of fire that danced in his hands, planning to use his past experiences to overcome his current weaknesses. His ultimate goal was to complete the Ring of Fire and eliminate his weaknesses forever. He also aimed to master Zygarde's swordsmanship, a technique that could help him confront his nemesis, Darius. Rayon knew that Darius was one of the continent's strongest transcendents, and getting revenge could drive him to madness. He resolved to slowly but steadily gain the power needed to defeat Darius when the right moment arrived. As Rayon was determined to push his limits further, a voice called out to him, acknowledging his wakefulness. It was his mother, reminding him that they had plans for the day and asking him to get ready to leave. Rayon gazed out of the window for a moment, his thoughts wandering to the balance of power in the continent, represented by the 5 demons and 6 emperors. As a cart rolled smoothly along the stone road, our hero continued to share his knowledge. He explained that he belonged to the Zygarde family, one of the 6 emperors' families. The emperors, he described, were a force for good in the continent, whereas the demons posed a threat to its peace. Beyond these major powers, there were several others, leading to a judgment ceremony to distinguish between the benevolent and malevolent forces. The cart eventually arrived at the gates of an annex, and Rayon revealed that it was the day of the Zygarde family's judgment ceremony. The hall was bustling with activity as families gathered for the event. Gossip filled the air as they chatted and engaged in trivial conversations. Talk turned to Sylvia and her son, and as they entered the hall, chatter grew louder. The families viewed Sylvia as an outcast, their cold glances and cutting words directed at her. Rayon, holding his mother's hand, walked through the hall amidst this disapproving audience. Families pointed out Rayon's height and rumors of his sickness, with some questioning why the outcast son was participating in the ceremony. The people expressed their hatred, worried that the presence of Sylvia and Rayon would taint the ceremony's standards. Rayon noticed the harsh comments coming from the families with a direct lineage. He briefly wondered if there were hidden circumstances behind their words, but dismissed such thoughts. He claimed not to care about the rumors circulating about him. However, his composure faltered when he overheard people calling his mother, Sylvia, shameless. Anger and frustration welled up within him, and he snapped back to reality when Sylvia called for him. She reassured him and asked him to focus on her. Bravely, our hero continued forward with his mother. Just then, a voice rang out, announcing the entrance of the patriarch. It had been a long time since Rayon had seen his grandfather. As he gazed at the patriarch's resplendent attire and watched him ascend to his throne, the powerful presence of the patriarch was palpable. The announcer declared his name with reverence, marking the beginning of the ceremony. As Glenn acknowledged the presence of everyone at the ceremony, Rayon anxiously anticipated what was to come next. The patriarch's hand swished, conjuring a giant sword before the assembled people. Rayon, taken aback, wondered if this was the fabled Sword of Judgment. The patriarch's commanding voice broke the silence, marking the official start of the judgment ceremony. Our hero explained that Glenn's Zygarde family had brought forth this special sword for the occasion. Upon placing their hand on the stone sword, it would determine the mana ability possessed by the participants. The attention of the audience shifted as the announcer called for a boy named Buin Zygarde to begin the ceremony. Buin eagerly stepped forward, his enthusiasm evident. Rayon pointed out that a child's mana ability became somewhat fixed after the age of 4, and the crowd watched with bated breath as a radiant energy enveloped Buin's hand upon touching the stone sword. Rayon detailed that the hall was filled with a loud and shining energy as the audience speculated on the light's quality. They concluded that Buin possessed a superior wind ability, a judgment met with applause. The patriarch too praised the remarkable attribute, considering it suitable for a swordsman, and encouraged Buin to harness the power of the wind. Next, a girl from the vassal family of Renan was called upon to come forward. As she acknowledged the call, the audience observed and judged the different patterns and interactions. Rayon clarified that the distance the light traveled indicated the purity of the child's mana. while the attribute was determined by the sword's tip. He emphasized that this was how the Zygarde family assessed talent. The families in the hall cheered enthusiastically, applauding Renan for her ability and praising her family name. They compared her favorably with Bowen. Rayon couldn't help but notice that these people held their talents in high regard, valuing them as much as their lives. He realized that his own abilities, despite having a 2-star level ring of fire, were still marred by the curse's cold influence. However, he seemed unfazed by such concerns, understanding that they didn't truly matter to him. As the announcer finally called for our hero, Rayon felt the intense glares and whispered discussions of the families directed at him. Even the patriarch shared this sentiment as Rayon was summoned. Sylvia, with a warm smile, urged her son forward, and Leon complied. He didn't anticipate exceptional results. He simply hoped to find a mana attribute that suited his unique body. Following Sylvia's guidance, Rayon took a nervous step forward, apprehension coursing through him. Placing his palm on the stone sword, he was startled when a brilliant golden light burst forth from the sword. Rayon's eyes widened in astonishment, pondering the significance of this radiant light. The intense light temporarily blinded his vision, but then he found himself in a surreal vision. He saw a man standing before him, surrounded by menacing demonic creatures. Rayon couldn't help but wonder what all of this meant. The demonic creatures appeared to glare viciously at the man standing in their midst. In response to the imminent threat, Rayon sat behind the stone sword for cover, observing this strange phenomenon. He questioned the identity of the man in front of him, but before he could delve deeper into his thoughts, the man raised a shiny sword that emitted a dazzling glow. With a powerful swing, the man cleaved through the approaching demonic creatures, who wailed in agony. A deafening blast followed, and Rayon was jolted back to reality, realizing he had a task to complete. Glancing at the stone sword, he was taken aback to see that the light emitted by his touch hadn't even reached the halfway mark. Laughter and mockery erupted from the families as they taunted Rayon for the light's inadequacy, pointing out that it didn't even possess a color. The patriarch, remaining silent, observed the unfortunate outcome of his grandson's ability. Sylvia, full of maternal concern, approached Rayon to comfort him, reassuring him that he had done his best. However, the harsh words of the families cut deep, and their taunts suggested that Rayon might only have inherited the Zygarde family's distinctive red eyes and blonde hair. The patriarch, witnessing the humiliating commotion, raised his voice to call for an end to the laughter and hysteria. The people immediately fell silent, cowed by the patriarch's stern authority. Glenn abruptly called off the ceremony, leaving the attendees bewildered. He requested the families to leave, one by one, with their capable children. Each family departed with a sense of pride, but confusion lingered in the air. As the doors of the hall closed behind the last family, Glenn, the patriarch, remained seated on his throne, a look of deep disappointment etched on his face. Beside him, a massive stone sword stood as a towering sentinel. Glenn, in a moment of solitude, called for his warrant, acknowledging the unfortunate turn of events regarding his grandson. In the quiet hall, an unforeseen event occurred. A brilliant golden light suddenly illuminated the entire space. Glenn's eyes widened in astonishment as the radiant glow flared and danced through the hall. It was a sight he never expected to witness. This golden light held a significance that was not lost on Glenn. He recognized it as the signature aura of the Zygarde family's first patriarch, known for its transcendent firepower that could even melt the flames of the demonic realm. The patriarch's gaze was fixed upon a book, seeking enlightenment in this moment. Glenn began to read about the Mata of dense golden light, a description of blinding beauty and radiant shine. Slowly, realization dawned upon him. The golden flame-like light emanating from the stone sword was none other than the golden flame aura. Glenn stood there in a daze, completely taken aback. Switching to a different scene, we find our hero, Rayon, who has grown significantly since the last time we encountered him. He glanced at a message window, contemplating his progress. 7 years had passed since the judgment ceremony, and Rayon was now 12 years old. Through consistent training, he stood at the doorstep of achieving the 3 fire rings, a remarkable feat for someone his age. His tolerance for water attributes had also improved, reaching a 2-star level, dispelling the coldness that initially plagued him. In the present, Rayon intended to begin his training when he was interrupted by Sylvia's voice. His mother approached him, questioning why he wasn't prepared for an occasion that awaited them. Rayon agreed to his mother's request, acknowledging that the second judgment ceremony had returned to confront him. Annoyed at the thought of facing those from the direct line of families, Rayon prepared to leave for the occasion. In this complex and emotionally charged universe, the concept of time seemed to bend and twist as we returned to the Judgment Ceremony Hall once more. The voice of the announcer praised the last family competitor and brought the judgment ceremony to an early end. Rayon wondered if this sudden conclusion was due to it being the judgment ceremony for the indirect bloodlines. As the patriarch, Glenn, called for Rayon, the young hero acknowledged his summons. However, his response was met with a confrontation. Glenn questioned Rayon about his lack of response to the basic training orders he had been receiving for the past month. Confused and taken aback by the sudden confrontation, Rayon had no idea what the patriarch was talking about. Amid this confusion, Sylvia, Rayon's mother, entered the scene to address the issue. She pleaded with the patriarch, explaining that Rayon still had a significant amount of cold energy in his body, making training an ordeal for him. She emphasized that Rayon was different from other children. Rayon was surprised to learn that his mother knew of his condition while he was kept in the dark. Despite Sylvia's desperate attempts, the patriarch remained stern, refusing to consider any exceptions. He made it clear that in the Zygarde family, there were no allowances for anyone, not even for the one bearing the Zygarde name. He emphasized that if someone couldn't walk, they must crawl to undergo the necessary training. Sylvia continued to plead with the patriarch, her voice quivering with desperation as she begged for more time for her son. However, Glenn showed no willingness to compromise. He questioned her if she intended to leave the family once again with the child. This unexpected ultimatum left Sylvia startled and in a daze. The patriarch emphasized that this was Zygarde land, and everyone had to adhere to their ways. He warned Sylvia that if she couldn't comply, she was free to leave at that very moment. The weight of his words pushed Sylvia into a deep well of despair and regret. In her moment of distress, Sylvia recalled all her past mistakes and failures, with the harsh words of the people echoing in her mind. They taunted her, calling her names and predicting that she would run away again, but this time, she wouldn't have any more energy cores to destroy. These cruel words cut through her like a blade, and she was shattered, humiliated by the people who looked down on her. Rayon watched his mother's expressions with a mixture of confusion, concern, and perhaps a growing resolve to face the challenges that lay ahead in this intricate and unforgiving world. In the midst of the tense and emotionally charged situation, Rayon came to understand why his mother, Sylvia, was treated so harshly. It was because she had once abandoned the family, a transgression that was not taken lightly in the Zygarde lineage. He revealed that Sylvia had some traces of martial arts knowledge but lacked mana energy. Rayon explained that she had broken her own mana circuits and energy cores and left to marry his father. Tragically, his father had passed away while she was still pregnant, leaving her with no choice but to return to the Zygarde family. Rayon grasped the harsh reality that a member of the direct lineage who had left and returned would be subjected to this cruel treatment. Fueled by anger and determination, Rayon stepped up in front of the patriarch, making it clear that he was Sylvia's son and couldn't stand by and watch his mother endure such harsh treatment. It appeared that a confrontation was imminent, but the question remained, would Rayon's grandfather, the patriarch, show him mercy for standing up to protect his mother? As Rayon approached the patriarch, Sylvia desperately pleaded with him to stop this act of defiance. She vowed to fix everything, yet Rayon remained resolute. He expressed his commitment to start his training as ordered by the patriarch the following month. Witnessing the bravery and determination of their young Zygarde, the current Martial Hall Master questioned whether Rayon had been made aware of the training lease. He suggested that, considering Rayon's current condition, he should reconsider, as he was still sick. However, Rayon refused to back down, expressing his determination to live up to the Zygarde name. In response to this, Glenn, the patriarch, directed a vicious glare at Rayon and questioned if the young boy truly understood the weight of his words. The intense pressure of the patriarch's aura coursed through Rayon's body, leaving him taken aback and startled. A small spatter of blood dropped to the floor, a clear indication of the immense force of the patriarch's ability. Rayon's eyes widened as he firmly clenched his fist, realizing the overwhelming power that emanated from the patriarch's gaze. He pointed out that even just the glare of the patriarch could have such a profound effect, feeling as though his heart was being crushed by the immense force of the aura. The confrontation between the young Zygarde and the powerful patriarch hung in the balance, with emotions running high and the stakes higher than ever. In the face of the overwhelming power and intense pressure emanating from the Patriarch, Rayon concluded that the Patriarch was far stronger than Robert, raising questions about the true power of the King of Annihilation. Helen and Sylvia rushed to comfort the distressed hero, realizing the profound effect the Patriarch's aura was having on him. The Martial Hall Master joined them, attempting to encourage the Patriarch to calm down. He reminded everyone that Rayon was just a child, but the Patriarch's deadly glare and aura only intensified. Sylvia and the Martial Hall Master stood down immediately in nervousness, unable to defy the Patriarch's will. Sylvia couldn't bear to see her son pressed on like this and immediately hugged him, attempting to protect him from the intense pressure. She screamed for her father to stop, pleading that Rayon was not in a condition to train so intensely in his current state. Observing this intense and emotional confrontation, Rayon delved into deep thought. He recounted his past life as an assassin, someone who had always lived in the shadows, closer to death than life. He never dared to step into the light. Feeling a push from within, Rayon addressed his new self, vowing not to continue hiding in the darkness. The young hero met the gaze of his former self, determined to no longer live as an assassin. With a gritted teeth and a fiery resolve, he moved forward and directly confronted the Patriarch. He declared that he would now live as a true Zygarde and bring Sylvia back to her original position in the family. Yelling at the Patriarch, Rayon revealed that he had been raised in a separate building of the residence and had no knowledge of how high the Zygarde family stood in the societal ranks. He expressed his desire to learn through training. Although sweat trickled down his face, his intentions were pure and strong. Rayon remembered the joyful times and happy moments he had shared with Sylvia and Helen and was determined to protect them and restore the smiles and joy of those precious to him. In response to Rayon's determination, Glenn questioned if the young boy wished to judge the Zygarde family's standards through training. Gathering all the strength he had left, Rayon stammered and shakily affirmed that he had no other choice. Breathing heavily and attempting to catch his breath, he stood before the Patriarch and declared that the instructor should prepare accordingly not to disappoint him. Upon hearing these words, Rayon calmly let go and slowly fell to the ground, exhausted and drained. Sylvia and Helen rushed to his aid as he lay on the ground, a pivotal moment in this intense and emotional confrontation within the Zygarde family. As his senses waned, he pondered the enigmatic duality of his existence. Once, he had been an assassin, a master of shadows and secrets. Now, he had embarked on a path that led him to the legend of the Fire's Ring, a tale that whispered promises of great power and destiny. With a fading resolve, he concluded that it was not impossible for him to become a prominent member of his family by harnessing both his assassin skills and the knowledge of the continent's legendary tale. The weight of fatigue bore down on him, but before he surrendered to its embrace, he clenched his fist and whispered his determination to the empty air, vowing to show the world just how strong he would become. The scene shifted abruptly, transporting us to a training ground where the rhythmic clank of swords filled the air. Children, each with a gleam of determination in their eyes, sparred and trained under the watchful eye of an instructor. This was a place of discipline, where the young honed their skills for an unknown future. In the midst of the training, a figure emerged, the intermediate Martial Hall Master, Karun Zygarde. He cast a skeptical gaze upon the scene, his eyes focused on a particular boy. The boy was the very same hero who had just struggled with his fading consciousness. Karun questioned the claims that this boy was too weak even to move properly. An anxious messenger arrived, carrying rumors that had been whispered among the maids. These rumors suggested that the boy was afflicted by a severe illness, a secret known to the saint and the Patriarch themselves. Karun's brow furrowed as he delved into deep contemplation. He recalled the times he had seen the boy, notably during the judgment ceremony, and remembered the boy's frail condition. He couldn't help but wonder how the child had managed to withstand the imposing aura of his father. With a decisive nod, Karun determined that this matter required immediate attention. He ordered the messenger to place a maid within the boy's residence, demanding speed and secrecy. Meanwhile, our determined hero found himself sprinting across lush, grassy fields. Hot on his heels was Sylvia, who pleaded with him to not push himself too hard. Yet, his resolve was unyielding. He continued to run, faster and faster, determined to prove himself. Amidst all this, the scene transitioned to the Patriarch's presence. As he walked with an air of authority, the secretary and guards offered salutes and stepped aside. The Patriarch approached a mysterious figure, a man with long crimson hair and distinct, pointy ears. This man lounged comfortably on a couch, his face hidden beneath a hat. Addressing the enigmatic figure as Rimmer, the patriarch requested that he cease pretending to be asleep and rise. Instantly, Rimmer obeyed, praising the patriarch's amazing prowess. The brilliant sword, Rimmer, entered the scene and shared an interesting perspective. He revealed that the patriarch was the only one on whom sleeping techniques didn't work, suggesting a unique strength in the patriarch. Expressing concern, Glenn, who was present during this exchange, questioned Rimmer's dedication to the concept of sleep. He wondered if the head instructor was wasting his time on such notions while the other instructors were hard at work. Rimmer, in his characteristic playful manner, countered this concern by stating that the instructors were merely following his orders and working with their bodies, whereas he worked with his mind. Annoyed by this response, the patriarch exclaims that Rimmer had not matured even after 50 years. Rimmer responded with laughter, stating that people don't change much and, after all, he was an elf. As the patriarch's concern grew, Rimmer asked if the patriarch was here to discuss his grandson and revealed that Sylvia had also visited. The mention of Sylvia's visit surprised the patriarch, who explained that Sylvia had asked him to ensure Rayon's safety. Rimmer stood to face the patriarch and elaborated that if he was there to make the same request, he was wasting his time. He firmly expressed that he wouldn't make exceptions for his own grandson. Surprisingly, the patriarch agreed, shaking up Rimmer, who had expected a different response. Glenn, now resolute, asked Rimmer not to lessen the intensity of the training and not to show favoritism. He declared that he didn't want any weaklings. Shocked and taken aback, Rimmer gasped and covered his mouth. He realized that the patriarch must love his grandson deeply, projecting onto him what he couldn't give to Sylvia. This revelation infuriated Glenn, and he expressed that if Rimmer weren't his veteran friend, his head would be rolling. He demanded that Rimmer not go easy on anyone and fail those who were unworthy, so that only the deserving ones could receive his training. Rimmer agreed with this demand, and the patriarch asked for his leave, stepping away as Rimmer enthusiastically saw him off. After the patriarch had left, Rimmer pondered what Rayon was like as he stood across his table, thinking of various training regimes. Meanwhile, the message window appeared again, showcasing our hero's updated abilities and stats. It revealed that he had achieved the 3rd ring of fire, signifying significant progress in his journey. Our hero, now a sight for sore eyes, interacted with the message window, smiling as he contemplated his achievements. He noted that the 3-star rings felt distinctly different, with increased sensitivity and a clearer mind. The story then transitioned to show our hero interacting with Sylvia, who was helping him up and scolding him for pushing himself too hard on the first day of his rigorous training. As Rayon gazed upon the message window, he contemplated the changes that had taken place in his body. Thanks to Sylvia's timely intervention, his body was becoming more flexible. He recognized that this magical status window was accelerating his growth, but he felt that achieving a 3-star fire ring was not the ultimate milestone for him. In his imagination, Rayon pictured himself as a commandant in the Zygarde family. He was determined to excel beyond anyone's expectations, silencing the mocking voices that had plagued him. He harbored a bounding desire to face the heavenly swordsman Darius Robert, vowing not to rest until he had slain him. However, his reverie was abruptly interrupted by a familiar voice calling his name. Sylvia, his mother, entered the room, concerned about why he was still awake. She took a seat across from him on his bed, and, knowing he was going to the training hall the next day, she wanted to talk to him before he left. Sylvia gazed at her child, and with a mother's intuition, she questioned if he truly had to go. She admitted her fear for his well-being, fearing he might get injured or hurt badly. Sylvia expressed her wish for him to postpone his enrollment for the next year. But Rayon's response was resolute. He couldn't entertain the idea. He vividly recalled all the humiliation and disdain he had faced from the direct or indirect bloodlines and even the workers in their annex. Rayon couldn't stand the way people's eyes filled with disgust when they looked at his mother. Sylvia was momentarily taken aback by his strong refusal. Still, Rayon continued to comfort her, explaining that he believed she would be treated better if he excelled in training. Sylvia, her fingers fidgeting, decided to share her own side of the story. She began by explaining the reasons for their separation and the rumors that had tainted their name. She revealed that she had fallen in love with his father during a mission, but their relationship was fraught with difficulties because he was just a knight at the time. Sylvia narrated how she had shut down her monocores and left the family, suggesting that she had made significant sacrifices for their love. She disclosed that he had an older sister named Shia, who was 10 years his senior. Their family had once lived in peace until an ambush by Eden's cadre disrupted their lives. Sylvia recounted the painful memories of the battle, explaining that Rayon's father wasn't as powerful as they had hoped. Tragically, she was pregnant with Rayon at the time, and despite her best efforts, there was nothing they could do against the overwhelming power of their attackers. She went on to reveal that Rayon's father had secretly hired guards, unbeknownst to her. However, they arrived too late to save his father and sister, who had already perished in the conflict. Sylvia concluded the heartbreaking story, explaining why she had returned to the family, even though she was treated as an outcast. She had been left with no other choice and didn't know how to navigate their harsh circumstances. As Sylvia finished her story, Rayon was flooded with emotions. He found his mother's actions selfish, believing she had thrown away her responsibilities for the sake of love, only to return to their family for salvation. However, as he grappled with his feelings, he realized that she was the one who had given him a new life and had shown him affection for the first time. In both lives, she was the only mother he had known. With understanding in his heart, Rayon asked Sylvia if she regretted her choices and if she wished to go back to the time before she left the family. Sylvia, however, shook her head and explained that she had felt invisible within the family before, but when she left, she finally felt like a real person. That was enough for her, being happy then and being happy now. As they continued their heartfelt conversation, Sylvia apologized to Rayon for being a terrible mother. But Rayon, ever the caring son, reassured her that it was fine. He told her that he would be okay and asked her not to worry. For a moment, they gazed into each other's eyes, and Rayon couldn't help but smile, reaffirming his affection for her. Then, something changed in the room. The mumbling of emotions turned into slow tears, and slow tears turned into uncontrollable sobbing as Sylvia, right in front of Rayon, began to cry. Surprised by her outpouring of emotions, he pleaded with her to stop crying. The mother-son interaction was filled with raw emotions and ended with Rayon seeing his mother out of his room. As she left, he sighed heavily, realizing that reassuring her had been an emotionally challenging task. In the dimly lit room, Rayon settled onto his bed, determined to utilize what little time he had before training commenced the next day. He intended to check the malleability of the Ring of Fire, which he held within him. With a sense of urgency, he positioned himself in a unique stance and began to perform the technique. As he focused, blue flames swirled and ignited in the room, casting an eerie glow. Rayon noticed that the ring spun faster now, having reached level 3, but he couldn't help but wonder what they would be like as they advanced to the intermediate levels. The room filled with the intensity of the technique as the flames blazed and flared. Suddenly, the fire blazed more violently and erupted into the air in front of Rayon. His eyes widened in shock as the flames seemed to take on a strange voice, announcing that it had finally arrived. It rose and continued to rise, and Rayon watched with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. A giant ball of blue flame materialized in front of him, and it seemed to viciously smile as it declared that the time had come for his rage to reach him. The blue flame acknowledged itself as Wrath, the second lord of the demon realm, and expressed its intention to help fulfill Rayon's dreams of revenge. Rayon was taken aback by this unexpected offer and questioned its legitimacy. A message window popped up, indicating that he had unlocked 2 new traits, one being the activation of the Rage trait, but the second trait remained unnamed. The blue flame continued to blaze and express its offer, but it was abruptly stopped in its tracks as it questioned why there was a child standing before it. Rayon took a step back, preparing for a possible confrontation, and asked the ball of fire what it was. Confusion seemed to grip both parties as the ball of fire also expressed concern, elaborating that the intense rage it sensed was not an emotion a child like Rayon could possess. Upon further examination, the blue flame's eyes widened as it realized that it was, indeed, the child before it who had been concealing a deep and dark rage within him. Rayon's expression hardened as he remained skeptical of the ball of fire's intentions. The ball requested that Rayon give away his body and soul, promising to help him achieve the revenge he desired. Rayon contemplated the sudden appearance of this mysterious being and whether it was connected to his violent rage against Darius Robert from his past life. Rayon's skepticism grew, and he firmly denied the offer, stating that he would exact his revenge on his own. This response appeared to perplex the ball of fire, which had anticipated a different answer. It floated around Rayon's body, expressing its doubt that Rayon fully understood the situation at hand. The atmosphere was charged with uncertainty as the two beings seemed to stand at an impasse. In the intense standoff with the enigmatic blue flame, the ball of fire appeared to have made its decision, announcing that it wasn't there to negotiate. It emitted a fiery glare, signaling that its choice had been made. The flames moved closer to Rayon, who couldn't help but notice that they felt oddly cold. Rayon instinctively realized that this meant something was amiss and took a nervous step back. With a sudden rush, the blue ball of fire lunged forward, yelling that all Rayon needed to do was give him his body. The flames closed in on Rayon, and he found himself unable to resist their approach. A burst of light illuminated the room, and the encounter left Rayon feeling unwell. He clutched his chest firmly and widened his eyes in shock. A strange and uncomfortable sensation gripped his body, and Rayon surmised that it was related to the beautiful cold attribute. An ominous and vicious avatar materialized, its heavy voice urging him to focus on the person who brought out his rage, promising to kill that person, even if they were a god. Rayon shivered and shook, rubbing his hands over his arms and curling up into a ball. He noted that he could endure the attack to some extent, thanks to his water attribute tolerance ability. However, the attack wasn't just cold, it was also psychologically tormenting. Painful memories from his past life replayed in his mind, reminding him of the suffering he had endured. A mysterious man's voice echoed near Rayon's ear, expressing violent intentions to harm someone. In his state of agony, Rayon contemplated giving up his body to the entity that had taken him hostage. He worried about the fate of the maids and his mother, Sylvia, if he succumbed to this sudden, malevolent force. Frustrated and determined not to give in easily, Rayon gritted his teeth, exclaiming that he couldn't let the entity have his body, no matter the consequences. The blue ball of fire hovered over him, persistently trying to persuade him, claiming that it would have been easier for Rayon to give in to his rage and accept the entity. It stated that it was now left with no choice but to swallow Rayon whole without delay. The situation continued to worsen, evident from the look of anguish on Rayon's face as he struggled to catch his breath. He sensed that his body was on the verge of breaking apart, realizing that he might die if he didn't act. With a sudden realization, he gripped his hands together and clenched his teeth, giving it his all. He understood that his water tolerance attribute might allow him to withstand the pain and overcome the torment, using the ring of fire as his last resort to survive. Rayon stood resolute against the biting cold that threatened to consume him. His breath misted the air as he harnessed the power of a fiery ring that encircled his outstretched hand. The ring of fire glowed fiercely, pushing back the encroaching frost, and warmth began to radiate from it, dispelling the numbing cold that had gripped him. Demon Lord looked upon Rayon with a mix of astonishment and frustration. He couldn't fathom how a mere child could defy his formidable power. With a deep, guttural groan of irritation, he questioned how such a feat was possible. The Demon Lord's annoyance deepened as he realized that his adversary was no more than a human child. Beads of sweat trickled down Rayon's face as the heat from the ring of fire intensified, matching the intensity of his determination. He met the fiery gaze of the Demon Lord and boldly declared that he would exact his revenge without allowing this powerful being to possess his body. In response to Rayon's taunting, the blue ball of fire seethed with rage, its fiery tendrils flaring wildly. It challenged Rayon, disdainfully teasing him and insisting that it, one of the great Demon Lords, was no ghost. The atmosphere crackled with tension as the two clashed. Intrigued by this peculiar interaction, Rayon questioned why the Demon Lord had been unable to kill him if he truly held dominion over the demon realm. With a devilish grin, he goaded the entity, suggesting that it simply disappear. The Demon Lord, infuriated by Rayon's insolence, growled and snarled, threatening him. As Rayon pondered the enigma that was the Lord of the Demon Realm, a sudden message from an unknown system window interrupted his thoughts. It announced the unlocking of special abilities, diverting Rayon's attention. Dazed and curious, Rayon examined the window, finding his stats presented in numerical form. The Demon Lord, ever baffled, could only scream in protest. He claimed ownership of the system but remained evasive about its nature or purpose. Ignoring the Demon Lord's frustration, Rayon speculated that this system might exist to facilitate his rapid progression. The blue ball of fire blazed and raged, its fiery emotions in turmoil, while it struggled to comprehend how Rayon had deduced this. Rayon, unimpressed with the Demon Lord's cryptic responses, noted that the entity couldn't even conceal its emotions properly. In the midst of their confrontation, Rayon began to ponder the mysterious nature of his newfound abilities. He mused that it had been strange how his ring of fire had become more potent in this life compared to his past existence. However, his realization that the system was responsible for this newfound power filled the spirit of the Demon Lord with rage and frustration. The spirit of the Demon Lord, unable to contain his anger any longer, demanded that Rayon surrender his authority and body. But just as the Demon Lord continued to press him, a powerful energy attack loomed on the horizon. Rayon's instincts kicked in, and he swiftly dodged the impending strike, which passed harmlessly through the Demon Lord's hollow spiritual form. This only served to stoke the flames of the spirit's anger. Intrigued by the outcome of his attack, Rayon explained that he had hit the Demon Lord with mana, realizing that the spirit did not possess a physical body, which meant aura attacks wouldn't work on him either. To further complicate matters, no one else seemed to have noticed the ongoing battle, suggesting that Rayon was the only one capable of seeing and hearing this fiery spirit. Frustrated by Rayon's taunts and games, the blue ball of fire had reached his limit. He shouted at Rayon and then surged towards him, coalescing into a bracelet adorned with ice crystals. The Demon Lord, now in the form of this unusual accessory, didn't shy away from conversation. He boasted that although his seal had recently been undone, his powers would soon return, making him unstoppable. He ominously warned Rayon that he would remain by his side until the day he died. Rayon felt a sense of nervousness at this development, viewing the entity as a leech. He worried that attempting to remove the spirit might cause the system to disappear, and he was concerned about the potential threat the Demon Lord posed to his loved ones, Sylvia and Helen. Reluctantly, he decided to keep the Demon Lord close, intending to restrict him and hoping that he would grow stronger quickly to counter the spirit's malevolent intentions. Rayon's stern gaze fell upon the bracelet, and he contemplated the Demon Lord's choice of form. He couldn't help but express his dissatisfaction, wondering aloud why the spirit had taken the shape of a floral bracelet, which he believed didn't suit him at all. As the spirit in the form of a bracelet frowns and demands respect for its taste, Rayon finds himself in a rather peculiar situation. He sighs, unable to fully comprehend the nature of this newfound partnership with the Demon Lord, or the potential dangers it might pose. Meanwhile, the morning sun bathes the ground outside with its warm, golden light. In the grand hall of the annex, Sylvia anxiously awaits her son's return, her worries evident on her face. By her side, Helen offers her comfort and reassurance, telling Sylvia that the young master will do well. In response to their presence, Rayon finally descends from his room, announcing his readiness. Sylvia and Helen's gazes immediately turn toward their young hero as he descends the stairs. With a warm smile, Rayon declares that he's heading to the training hall. As Rayon makes his way to the door, leaving the annex for his important day at the training hall, Helen can't help but worry about her young master. She reminds him not to push himself too hard. Rayon acknowledges her concern, and, as he points out Sylvia's mixed expression of sadness and pride, he assures her that he won't overexert himself. Sylvia, watching her son leave, can't contain her emotions. She asks Helen if she thinks Rayon will be all right, and Helen consoles her, explaining that Rayon has improved greatly, to the point where he might even excel in his training. Sylvia, still gazing at her precious son, agrees with Helen but can't shake the fact that Rayon is different from other children. Shortly before the send-off, Sylvia embraces her young master, and Helen informs her that the instructor assigned to him is the best in the Zygarde family. She continues to offer comfort, assuring Sylvia that Rayon has been putting in a lot of effort recently and is determined to succeed. Rayon echoes Helen's words, expressing his own determination to his mother. He promises not to get hurt and asks her not to worry. However, Sylvia, being a loving mother, can't help but shed tears as she clings to her dear son. She recalls Rayon's words, urging her to trust him and keep faith in his promise. She holds on to her chest and calls out to her departing son. Her trembling and despair are palpable. She doesn't want her beloved son to leave, and she tearfully implores him to return safely. Helen, aware of Sylvia's emotional turmoil, continues to offer her support, urging her to stay strong in the face of Rayon's departure. The training grounds had been meticulously prepared for the aspiring martial artists, and the scene was bustling with activity. As participants from various backgrounds walked up the walkway into the 5th training hall of the Zygarde family, conversations filled the air. Among them was a group of 2 siblings, who smiled and mentioned that their parents had encouraged them to strive for the top 10. Among the large crowd of enthusiastic young martial artists was our hero, Rayon. He couldn't help but be taken aback by the sheer number of participants. Rayon noted that it wasn't just members from the Zygarde family's direct and indirect bloodlines, but also students recommended from vassal families and even outsiders. He realized that, as Helen had mentioned, this year's enrollment was substantial, and the 6th training hall was assisting in the process. As he surveyed the area, Rayon overheard hushed chuckles and whispered comments from some students. They were openly making fun of him, calling him weak and fragile and ridiculing the floral bracelet he wore. This mockery sparked the fiery spirit within the bracelet, which flared violently, infuriated by the insults. Rather than shying away from this confrontation, Rayon calmly made his way towards the 2 students who had been mocking him. The blue ball of fire flowed around him, and he expressed his disdain for these parasites who lacked humility. He warned them, his words filled with a dark intensity, that if they didn't stop their taunts, he would rip out their eyeballs and crush their spirits. He demanded that instead of buzzing around like mosquitoes, they should say everything to his face. This unexpected confrontation sent shockwaves through the students. They immediately turned to face Rayon, their earlier laughter silenced. Rayon didn't back down. He confronted them and questioned whether they knew the saying about not speaking ill behind someone's back, especially when they couldn't say it to their face. The students, taken aback and fearful, mumbled in response. They tried to insult Rayon further, claiming that he was living in an annex and wasn't even from the direct bloodline. However, Rayon remained unfazed by their harsh words. He calmly pointed out that these students, too, were from the indirect bloodlines, which didn't grant them the right to question his audacity to confront them. The tension in the training hall had intensified, and Rayon's display of confidence and determination left the students reconsidering their earlier mockery. The scene was a testament to Rayon's resolve and unwillingness to be pushed around by his peers. The students, enraged by Rayon's confrontation, lashed back, accusing him of using a tone reserved for those of lower rank. In their fit of frustration, one of the students rushed forward, attempting to grab Rayon by the neck and raise a fist to strike. In response, Rayon's eyes began to glow with an intense, crimson hue as he prepared to fight back. But just as the situation was about to escalate further, a commanding voice yelled out, ordering the combatants to cease their fighting. The student who had charged at Rayon immediately stood down, concerned about the consequences of their actions. Another student, evidently more level-headed, stepped in, reminding everyone that the training was about to begin and that outsiders were also present. He questioned whether the students intended to bring shame to the Zygarde name. The young man introduced himself as Buin Zygarde, hailing from the direct bloodline of the family. He faced off against our hero in an intense stare-down. The 2 students who had initially confronted Rayon stood beside Buin, ashamed of their behavior, and apologized to Rayon. Buin, in an arrogant and dismissive manner, criticized Rayon, asserting that he was nothing more than dust. He advised Rayon to stay low if he didn't want to get kicked out of the annex. Rayon couldn't help but notice Buin's disdain, recalling the time at the judgment ceremony when his interaction with the patriarch had brought him attention. Buin scoffed and frowned, convinced that a loser like Rayon would surely fail the training. However, before Buin could walk away, Rayon interjected, declaring that he had heard enough of Buin's arrogance. This unexpected statement startled Buin, and he turned his head to face the disrespectful child. Rayon continued, leveling insults at Buin, asserting that the only thing going for him was his direct bloodline heritage. He warned Buin that he had no right or authority to talk down to him, especially when he wasn't even a trainee. Rayon went even further by taunting Buin, suggesting that he might achieve something by running to his father like a brat. Buin seethed with frustration, gritting his teeth and glaring at Rayon, his eyes sharpened with anger. He was on the brink of retaliating when the sudden entrance of a red-haired elf interrupted their confrontation. The elf, clearly taken aback by the 2 youngsters ready to fight, stared in amazement, having stumbled upon a situation that was quickly escalating out of control even before the training had officially begun. Rayon scanned the crowd, his eyes widened in recognition. There, amidst the throngs of students, stood Rimmer. It was an unexpected sight, for Rayon had heard that Rimmer had retired from training, and his sudden appearance piqued his curiosity. Rimmer, an imposing figure, had a sense of joy about him. He asked the kids to hold off on any confrontations until after the entrance ceremony, his voice carrying an air of authority. He took center stage and introduced himself as the head instructor who would oversee their training. Amidst the sea of eager faces, Rimmer expressed that there were 160 candidates before him. Then, he dropped a bombshell. He intended to cut that number down to a mere quarter. The students were left bewildered, their expressions ranging from confusion to astonishment. They couldn't fathom how such a claim could be true. Rimmer clarified his intentions, asserting that he preferred to have a small number of elites, and he had no interest in the riffraff. His words ignited anger, and the Lord of the Demon Realm, unable to contain his fury, threatened to cut down the elf's ears if he dared to look down on him. Rayon, aware of the potential trouble that could arise, tried to silence the Lord of the Demon Realm by striking down on his bracelet. Rimmer, seemingly unperturbed by the commotion, sat casually on his chair on the stage, his presence commanding respect. He made it clear that his word was law within these training grounds, and anyone with objections should take them up with the Patriarch. With the warning delivered, Rimmer wasted no time and called for the tests to begin. He pointed at the students, instructing them to start running. The command left the students perplexed initially. Why running, they wondered. But the urgency in Rimmer's voice was evident, and soon they rushed off, competing with each other with diligence. Rimmer cheered them on, shouting words of encouragement. He emphasized that the basics of martial arts were physical strength and mental power, urging them to run as fast as they could. The students sprinted ahead, each vying to outdo the other, their determination on full display. Amidst the fervor, a blue ball of fire materialized in front of Rayon. It expressed concern, wondering why Rayon lingered at the back of the pack when he should be at the forefront. But Rayon's response was calm and resolute. It wasn't a competition, he explained, and he didn't need to get ahead of the others. He understood that Rimmer was assessing more than just physical prowess. He was delving into their potential and temperament, a deeper judgment that went beyond what met the eye. As Rayon continued to push himself in the test, sweat trickled down his face, and he desperately huffed, trying to catch his breath. He realized that the key to success in this test was endurance. He was determined to persevere until the very end, no matter how challenging it might be. The instructors overseeing the test announced the frontrunners, Sir Bowen and Lady Renan, who were sprinting at the front of the pack. They marveled at the speed displayed by these two students, noting that their speed was exceptional, even beyond their age. They also commented that Bowen and Renan could maintain this pace for hours on end. Turning their attention to Rayon, they pointed out that he had been lagging behind all this time, unable to catch up. However, they acknowledged that he was sick, which made it impressive that he could run at all. Rimmer, the brilliant sword instructor, observed the test and the comments of the other instructors. He wore a joyful but astonished expression on his face as he smiled. Rimmer found the situation interesting, as he had never seen anything quite like this before. Deep in contemplation, he expressed that while some humans had talents he could not calculate and were the strongest on the continent, others had more predictable potential. For example, he could foresee the future power of Bowen and Renan. However, when it came to Rayon, he confessed that he could not see anything at all. Rimmer concluded that this could only mean one thing. Rayon was stronger than even him, putting him out of Rimmer's reach. He stroked his chin in curiosity and smiled, finding Rayon's enigmatic strength fascinating. As the two kids who had previously picked on Rayon now ran past him, they taunted him for his earlier arrogance, suggesting that he wouldn't be able to keep up with them. Rayon found himself in last place, and the brats assumed he would fail the test soon. However, undeterred by the taunts and the challenging circumstances, Rayon continued to sprint and run with all his might. His determination never wavered. Suddenly, he looked up in concern and questioned the nature of their training. In his past life, Rayon had been constantly on the run, evading deadly creatures as part of his training as an assassin. To him, this training was far too easy in comparison, and a wide smile graced his face as he commented on the stark difference in difficulty. Rayon's resilience and mysterious strength were poised to set him apart in the rigorous world of training under Rimmer's watchful eye. The race continued with unyielding spirit as the students rushed forward on the track, their determination evident. Observing them closely was Rimmer, the brilliant sword instructor, his keen eye never missing a detail. Among the participants, he couldn't help but single out Rayon, who continued to run despite the odds stacked against him. Rimmer couldn't help but question how Rayon was still able to run. He believed that Rayon had exhausted his stamina long ago and had pushed himself beyond the limits of determination. In Rimmer's assessment, Rayon shouldn't have had any stamina left to squeeze out. He recognized that Rayon had the same kind of mentality as those who had been trained to survive until the brink of death, a resilience that fascinated him, especially in such a young child. As Rayon continued to run and keep pace with Bowen, Rimmer found it quite interesting. His young student's determination and endurance were proving to be remarkable. Bowen, on the other hand, scoffed and questioned how Rayon, who had been deemed too weak to train, was still running alongside him. He recalled the information from his messenger about the curse of the bitter cold that the Saint of Rags had assessed Rayon with. According to the messenger, Rayon had a low chance of surviving childhood, let alone learning martial arts. Frustrated at things not going according to plan and everyone proving him wrong, Bowen gritted his teeth and yelled out a command. In response, a burst of energy surrounded him, with beams of light crackling around his body. In his childish arrogance, Bowen had begun using his aura in the race, just to show off his superiority to everyone else. He rushed forward with electric beams crackling and sparking around him, leaving behind Renan and Rayon. Rayon, witnessing the sudden change in speed and agility, was taken aback. He realized that, despite Bowen's noble demeanor, he was just a child, and Rayon speculated that Lady Renan might actually be much more mentally mature than the brash noble who rushed ahead. Keeping his focus, Rayon understood that this was a test and not a competition. There was no need to break his pace just because his opponent wanted to show off. The sun shone down once again, casting its hot beams on the ground. As Bowen's display of power and speed continued, all the other students who had withdrawn from the test due to exhaustion fell to the ground. The race, full of surprises and challenges, was far from over, and Rayon's determination and resilience continued to shine. As the two kids who had previously insulted Rayon during the race caught their breath, they couldn't help but wonder how the young boy continued to run with such determination. One student mentioned that she had heard rumors about Rayon being weak due to illness, but his current performance contradicted everything they had heard. They marveled at his resilience and determination. However, Rayon, although he pressed on, knew that his condition was far from ideal. The coldness in his body made him feel as if he were about to die. He added that it felt like his heart and lungs might collapse at any moment. Nevertheless, he was unwavering in his determination. In a bid to push through the extreme conditions, he utilized the Ring of Fire, attempting to extract every ounce of stamina he had left. Despite the grim circumstances, Rayon couldn't help but smile, noting that the Ring of Fire was improving quickly. He planned to activate it at full force to experience its true effects. However, just as he was about to proceed, the voice of the blue spirit popped up once again, referring to Rayon as pitiful and questioning the state of his body. The spirit, appearing beside him, demanded Rayon to hand over his body and soul instead of trying to surpass the blue-haired human. Rayon exclaimed in refusal, but it was too late. The spirit declared that it would freeze everything, and a wave of freezing coldness struck Rayon, causing him to frown in pain and agitation. Despite the intense pain, Rayon knew he had to endure the cold in order to pass the test and move forward. He slowed down his pace and felt his mind being taken over by rage, but he remained determined to pretend as if nothing was wrong. Growing fed up with the spirit's interference, Rayon confronted it, asking it to stop the sabotage and stay still because its instigations wouldn't work on him. However, the demon lord persisted and questioned Rayon's claim, elaborating that there was no human who could withstand his rage. The cold intensified, cutting through Rayon's vitals, and he grabbed his chest in agony. The freezing cold struck again, and the demon lord expressed a desire to see how long Rayon could endure the pain. For Rayon, this was just a small setback. He knew that he had to endure the pain, for if he showed even the slightest hint of weakness, the demon would consume him entirely. The pain intensified and grew, but Rayon held his own, determined to survive. The enraged blue ball of fire expressed its frustration, questioning why its tactics wouldn't work on the seemingly weak young boy. Rayon's resilience and determination were proving to be stronger than the spirit's attempts to undermine him, setting the stage for a battle of willpower and endurance. As Rayon pushed himself to the limit, fatigue finally caught up with him. His body felt as though it were on the verge of collapsing, and he believed he might die at any moment. His eyes began to close slowly, and his consciousness slipped away. He struggled to breathe properly, but before more damage could be done, the brilliant sword instructor, Rimmer, called for the test to be over. All the students participating in the test, including Rayon, fell to the ground to catch their breath. Rayon, sweating profusely and breathing heavily, felt the weight of how close he had come to danger. Bowen, still frustrated, called him a determined bastard in annoyance. Renan observed Rayon while catching her breath, and the spirit of the demon lord reappeared to throw a tantrum. It yelled, puffed up, and expressed frustration, calling Rayon a monstrous bastard and questioning how he had managed to endure. Rayon reminded the spirit that this was precisely why he had asked it to stop its interference. Noticing that the ring of fire had also grown and, thanks to a status window, his physical capacity had improved, Rayon aspired to achieve greater feats through continued training. However, his attention was soon diverted when he saw a massive status window in front of him, notifying him of fulfilling conditions that resulted in increased experience points and physical capabilities. Rayon stared at the status window in astonishment, his mouth hanging open, while the spirit of the demon lord exclaimed and questioned why Rayon was getting extra experience points for enduring its rage. It yelled out in frustration, deeming it absurd. The students once again stood before the stage as Rimmer, the brilliant sword instructor, commended them for their efforts. He moved on to address what he had said before the test started. The looks on the students' faces showed despair and nervousness as they anticipated their inevitable failure. However, to their surprise, Rimmer playfully exclaimed that he had lied about cutting down the numbers to a quarter. This resulted in a loud and collective gasp from the students, which quickly transitioned into yelling as they expressed their frustration at running so hard because of his earlier statement. Rimmer clarified that he couldn't afford to fail so many people on the first day, as he wouldn't have anyone left to teach. He also added that he hadn't specified that they would fail today. This transitioned the students' emotions back to horror as Rimmer fiercely warned them that if they showed the same results as today, most of them were doomed to fail. This warning galvanized the students, and their determination to train hard was reignited. The roller coaster of emotions had left them both relieved and motivated to face the challenges ahead. Rimmer continued to pace across the stage, addressing the students who had just completed the challenging test. He reminded them of running with all they had and pointed out that out of the 160 participants, only one had managed to keep it up until the very end. He also mentioned the students who had given up and started using aura. This revelation caused Bowen, who was guilty of using aura, to fear suspension, but Rimmer assured him that he didn't care how they accomplished the test. He emphasized that as the ones taking the test, they should do what they needed to pass. Rimmer made an OK sign in front of Rayon, indicating that he acknowledged their efforts, and continued to tell the students that if they followed his instructions, they wouldn't fail the test. However, he warned them that it wouldn't be easy. Turning to face the students once again, Rimmer informed them that they were now provisional trainees but would become official trainees once they passed the next test, which would take place in the next 6 months. He joyfully mentioned that he would pick the top trainees, although he wouldn't be the one to rank them. As the trainees listened, Rimmer let them go and guided them to the top-quality dormitories provided by the Zygarde family, along with a nearby training center. The scene transitioned to a peaceful forest near the training hall, where the sun shone through the leaves. Rimmer walked up to a mysterious figure in royal attire who was waiting for him. One of the brilliant sword winks and humorously commented that someone had taken his napping spot. He revealed the person to be the Patriarch, Glenn. The Patriarch acknowledged Rimmer's arrival and immediately asked him what had happened. In response, Rimmer questioned why the Patriarch was asking when he had been there the entire time to witness the events. He explained that the Patriarch knew he had exceptional foresight and could see the potential in children. Rimmer elaborated that Bowen and Renan were highly talented, as the Patriarch already knew, and the other children showed great potential to become pillars of the family. However, he admitted that he couldn't see anything in Rayon. The Patriarch acknowledged this information, and Rimmer added that he was sure Rayon had run out of stamina, which left him puzzled about how Rayon had continued to run. He also expressed joy at the prospect of something finally interesting happening in his life since his energy core had been ruined. The Patriarch, leaping off the stone he stood on, revealed that being a trainee instructor was what Rimmer had wanted. As he walked away, he asked Rimmer to focus on his duties and not get distracted. Rimmer obediently agreed to the Patriarch's request, stating that he believed there would be someone this year to whom he could entrust his future. However, the Patriarch disagreed, dismissing it as a mere coincidence and exclaiming that the child couldn't become a martial artist. As he saw the Patriarch off, Rimmer acknowledged this statement with a smile and sighed with the rest he needed. With the test now over, Rayon set off for the training center. 2 students glared at and observed him as he walked away, and the blue ball of fire couldn't help but express amazement at Rayon's unwavering commitment to training. A group of students standing behind Rayon as he walked away glared at him with vicious intent. As the sun set over the training grounds, they exclaimed that it was impossible for Rayon to have held on for so long, especially given that they had heard he was sick. A yellow-haired man from the indirect lineage, Krine, gleefully assessed the situation. He mentioned that he had heard that Rayon had received some kind of miracle medicine from the Saint of Rags a long time ago. This revelation shocked the two trainees who overheard, as they concluded that Rayon had been dependent on the medicine to perform so well during the training. They were furious that he had used such means to show off. Krine suggested that they should teach the arrogant bastard a lesson for using cheats against them during training. Without hesitation, the group of students confronted Rayon, slamming him into a tree. Rayon groaned in pain as he slid down to the ground under the pale moonlight. He questioned why they were doing this to him. Krine scoffed at Rayon's question, while the other two students pointed at him and accused him of losing his direct lineage title but acting arrogantly because of the miracle medicine. They claimed that without the medicine from the Saint of Rags, he couldn't have performed so well in training and criticized him for using dirty tricks. Rayon sensed the anger and rage emanating from the students and concluded that they were upset over something trivial. As the confrontation escalated, they started preparing and stretching to launch an attack. They reassured Rayon that they were only there to talk and proceeded to stand before him, threatening him. Krine led the group and rushed forward, exclaiming that the instructor had asked them to have a conversation. The situation had taken a hostile turn, and it seemed that Rayon would have to defend himself against his fellow trainees. Rayon slowly rose to his feet. His presence seemed to stir unease among the students who surrounded him, as well as the enigmatic spirit of the Lord of the Demon Realm that inhabited him. The spirit, a powerful force of darkness, questioned Rayon's passive stance, reminding him of his supposed role as a vessel. But it was clear that Rayon was far from intimidated, for he expressed nonchalance toward this burden. Abruptly, Krine, their fearless leader, became the unwitting recipient of a powerful punch to the face. The once menacing glare that had fixated on Krine now transferred to the courageous warrior, Rayon. The students were caught off guard by this shocking turn of events. They turned their heads to see their fallen leader lying on the forest floor, defeated with just one blow. Rayon, his voice dripping with a threatening tone, challenged the legitimacy of the students' claims to speak freely. The vicious glare returned, a silent dare for them to continue. Two students, perhaps fueled by desperation, rushed forward to assail the talented trainee. However, their efforts were in vain as they stood no chance against Rayon, a former world-renowned assassin. The group fell to their knees in surrender. One of the remaining students called upon his companions to question their actions. He resolved to take on Rayon himself, rushing forward with a clenched fist and questioning Rayon's abilities to defeat him. But before he could finish his sentence, his face met Rayon's iron-hard fist, sending him sprawling to the ground. Rayon continued to effortlessly vanquish any opponents who dared charge at him, the spirit of the Demon Lord watching with approval. It deemed his performance magnificent. The defeated students, battered and bruised, were left with no choice but to beg for mercy, renouncing their hostile behavior toward the one they had labeled a bastard in a futile act of violence. As if to drive home the lesson, Rayon stepped on Krine's hand, eliciting agonizing wails that echoed throughout the forest. He demanded one more thing from Krine, his voice firm and unwavering. The question hung in the air, heavy and charged. Who was the person that made you do this? Rayon asked, his eyes locked on Krine. He mentioned a name, Buin, and Krine's reaction was immediate. His eyes widened, and he was clearly alarmed, but he stammered out that they had acted without the young master's knowledge, insisting that Buin was not related to the situation. As the dust settled after the confrontation, Rayon, our hero, found himself in a state of confusion. He had assumed that Buin harbored hatred for him. However, the unexpected revelation from Krine suggested that Buin might not be irredeemable. Rayon decided to clarify the terms of their conversation, making sure Krine wouldn't divulge their encounter to others. With a nod of agreement from Krine, the matter seemed to be settled. But then, something unexpected happened. A bully, perhaps seeking vengeance, grabbed Krine by the hair and pulled him closer to Rayon. Our hero's eyes bore into Krine's, filled with a chilling warning. He made it abundantly clear that any future interactions between them would not end well for Krine. Shivering with fear and horror, Krine quickly assured Rayon that he would never even step on Baoen's shadow. With that, The group hastily retreated from the threatening young master, eager to put the encounter behind them. However, in the shadows nearby, a mysterious figure observed the entire situation. This man turned out to be Rimmer, who couldn't help but smile at the outcome of the quarrel. He found it intriguing, like watching a younger version of someone known as the Patriarch. Rimmer's interest in Rayon grew as he noted the young hero's apparent talent in martial arts, referring to him as a true Zygarde. His excitement continued to grow as he believed there was an unknown talent hidden among the most promising children. Back in the training halls, Rayon received a message notifying him that Wrath was satisfied with the conditions being fulfilled and had increased his agility by 1. The spirit of the Demon Lord expressed rage and anger over these pointless bonus points, questioning the increase in ability. Rayon, however, retorted by asking why the spirit, who had created the system, didn't know this. The spirit, frustrated and teeth-gritted, confronted Rayon, explaining that he didn't know because such power had never been taken away from him before. Rayon, now enlightened about this revelation, acknowledged it with excitement. This further irked the spirit, who accused him of being ungrateful. Ignoring the spirit's complaints, Rayon sat down at his desk with a cup in hand. Then, the spirit presented an offer to Rayon, sparking his curiosity. Rayon asked about the offer, prompting the spirit to propose a bet. The spirit wanted to wager its rage against Rayon's experience points. If Rayon won, he would gain all the spirit's experience points. Sipping on his drink, Rayon contemplated this offer, a hint of intrigue in his eyes. As Rayon carefully examined the message window displaying Wrath's bet, he focused on the condition imposed. He had to pass as a top trainee in the upcoming training test. Rayon sought clarification and asked whether this was the same test Rimmer had mentioned, to which Wrath confirmed that it was, emphasizing that he would select only the top trainees. Rayon's gaze then fell upon a card labeled trade option. Curious, he inquired about it, and Wrath explained that it would allow him to acquire one of Wrath's traits, but at a reduced level since Rayon was considered inferior in comparison. Rayon's interest piqued. He asked what the rage was, and Wrath clarified that he would take on Wrath's own intense emotion of rage. Wrath added with a wide smile that what Rayon would receive seemed insignificant, but it had the potential to make him lose control and go insane. Rayon couldn't help but acknowledge that Wrath was being unusually honest in his responses, considering his typical behavior. Contemplating the potential rewards of this bet, Rayon likened it to a poisoned apple that he would have to eat. However, given his current circumstances and his understanding of the difficulty of achieving the top position as a normal child, he decided to accept Wrath's bet. As he extended his hand to accept the bet, blue flames flared around his hand, and the message window confirmed that he had indeed accepted Wrath's wager. Rayon believed that he could rely on his past life experience to give him an advantage in the upcoming test, and he was determined not to lose. As the sun began to rise, the training grounds were filled with heavy breathing and the sound of students panting. They lay on the ground, drenched in sweat, trying to recover from an arduous training session. Many of them complained that their legs felt like they were on the verge of breaking, unable to stand after the grueling early morning exercise. Rimmer, the instructor, explained the stance he had asked the students to perform, describing it as the horse-riding pose. Despite his disagreement with the description, the students struggled to maintain the position, trembling and shaking as they did so. Rimmer emphasized that this pose was a fundamental building block of martial arts. Finally, one of the students had had enough and loudly declared his frustration. He expressed his desire to learn some actual swordsmanship from the head instructor, and another student chimed in, complaining that they had done nothing but cycle between running and awkward poses, transitioning to their growing discontent with the training. The students yearned for a more engaging and practical martial arts instruction from their instructors. As the fallen students were called to their feet and encouraged to cease their complaints, the focus shifted toward training their swordsmanship to prevent their skills from rusting. Rayon, however, decided not to join them. Instead, he walked in the opposite direction, accompanied once again by the spirit of Wrath. Wrath inquired if Rayon didn't plan to follow the group, but Rayon made it clear that swordsmanship wasn't his immediate priority. He considered it a waste of time for someone who lacked the basics and needed to focus on building physical strength. The bitter cold curse had left his body weaker than others, so he emphasized the importance of mastering the fundamentals for growth and training. He reminded himself not to feel rushed, taking his own advice to heart and deciding to concentrate on training his body. Sitting in a plank position, Rayon's face became drenched in sweat as he engaged in a vigorous exercise routine. Unbeknownst to him, a mysterious figure lurked in the shadows, observing his progress. This figure was revealed to be Renan, a member of the castle family. She watched him from her hiding place, noticing his rapid improvement, which seemed at odds with the reputation of his illness. Renan questioned whether increasing the weight daily was a sensible strategy, considering Rayon's consistent efforts despite his health condition. She speculated that his attitude toward training might be the key to his rapid progress. Slowly, she approached him, finding something peculiar about him that piqued her curiosity. When Rayon noticed Renan approaching, he asked her about her presence. Their exchange was tense, with neither of them breaking the silence. And there you have it, the captivating tale of Rayon's incredible journey in the mystical world. If you want to find out what happens next, stay tuned because we'll be continuing this story in our upcoming videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to join us on this thrilling adventure. Until next time, folks. Thanks for watching.